finesse jigs and your smaller jigs, a swim jig even. There is the ball head, brush head style, football head jig, arky head. 9 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10, they're gonna hit the jig and they're gonna take off, or they're gonna hit it, kill it, take it.
Setting the hook with Jose.
What's up everyone, it's Jose and welcome to Setting the Hook. Today I'm going to talk to you about probably my favorite way to fish as of lately, and that is the jig. But before I get into, my top 3 tips for jig fishing, I want you to go ahead and do me a favor, hit that like and that subscribe down below. Hit the bell notification if you want to stay up to date on everything going on from KastKing, whether it's product reviews, new product releases, top tips from our staff, our pro fishermen, and everything in between. But, without further ado, let's get to it. My number 3 tip for jig fishing is jig selection. There's a lot of different jigs out there. I'm just going to show a few that I have on deck. There is the ball head. There's a brush head style. And there's an arky head. Right? And there's also, a football head jig. I don't use a football head a lot, even though a lot of people think that is their absolute favorite. So why would you use each in certain situations? So if you're fishing and the ground is littered with crap, I mean, talking about ton of down trees, mainly rocks. If you're fishing a lot of rocky bottom, then that's where definitely a football head jig is going to come into play, and that's what you need to do. Why? Because of that wider head. When it's coming through, knocking down on the rocks, it's not going to get stuck as something like a brush head jig. So when would you throw a brush head? Well, I kind of just talked about that, right? Anytime you're fishing down brush, deep cover, anything like that, that is normally what you're going to throw. I prefer, personally, 9 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10, I'm throwing a brush head style jig. Now, there's also the ball head jig that is similar to the brush head style, but a lot of the finesse jigs and your smaller jigs are going to have the ball head. Now, if you want something that's more of a hybrid of everything, the brush, a swim jig even, and the football head jig, I mean, it's a little bit fatter, won't get stuck into everything, and that's definitely your arky head style. You see how it's just got a little bit of an arc on it, just like that. It's also great for skipping docks due to the shape of its head. It's easy to get up in there, and a big favorite for a lot of fishermen. So those are the different styles and how you would use it. So my number 2 tip is gear selection. A lot of times when we say jig, we're thinking big jigs, gigantic jigs. So we're going to go heavy rod, long, heavy rod, stout, broomstick, if you will. But that's not always the case. The way to look at what jig I should be, what rod I should choose for each jig, you want to look at the hooks. So this ball head, very small hook. That's like a 3/0 regular gauge. So of course I'm going to throw that on my KastKing jig worm rod, or at the most a medium heavy rod. This one is a little bit thicker, a little bit longer, a little bit bigger skirt, but definitely a thicker gauge hook. So you're going to want to throw that on no less than a medium heavy. Now we get to this big bad boy that I use a lot. That's like a 5/0 extra heavy gauge. I'm looking at the tip of it. I think it's a Mustad, just looking at the tip. I don't think it's a Trocar. And that's what a lot of the hooks. Personally, I prefer jigs that are made with a Gamakatsu or a Trocar hook. But even some of the Mustads, they're very sharp, very stout hook. That's when you're going to want to utilize your extra heavy or your heavy. I shouldn't say extra heavy, but you're going to want to use your heavy power rods. So even when I'm throwing that, I'll use my 7.3 heavy spirale rod, and it does great, very accurate into where I cast it. And I know that when I set that hook, it's gonna get that hook pierced through the fish's mouth, their gill plate even, because a lot of times the fish will devour it, and so you need to have the backbone to really set that hook. So my number one tip for that is understanding how to fish it and understanding the bites. How to fish it. For the most part, for me, it's cast it out, let it sit. Let it sit for not a stupid long time, but long enough time where it's just gonna sit there. And then you're just gonna go pop, pop, reel in that slack and let it sit. And that's it. Or just drag it slowly with the rod and slowly reel down the slack. Slowly retrieve it. You always want to retrieve a jig with the rod, not retrieving it by reeling it in. Unless you have something like a toxic head, or I can't think of the other names as well, where it looks like a football head weight and then it's like a swing tail type of deal. Then you're just gonna slowly reel it in. But for the most part, that's what you're just gonna wanna do. So it's just gonna cast it out, let it sit, hop, hop, pause. Or just pause. Or drag it slow and then reel it down. Drag it slow, reel it down. Now, the way that I say that the bites are different. So if I'm talking about a 3 pound or less fish, the bite is gonna be normally tap, tap. You're gonna feel tap, tap, and then you're gonna either see your line kind of move or it's just gonna sit. You feel that tap, tap, reel in your slack, set the hook. Bigger fish, I'm talking about 5 pounds and bigger. Now, of course, I'm saying this, but a 6 pound is different than a 5, a 7 is different than a 6, and so on and so on and so on. But normally, with your 5 pound and larger fish, the way it's gonna feel is if you're dragging or if you're pausing or if you're reeling in a slack, whatever, it's just gonna go. And it's gonna feel like you got caught on a log, on a rock, something. But you're just gonna go boom. And then that's when you need to pause and see what it's doing. Reel in the slack. If it tries to take off or you see your rod start to load up, then you need to set the hook. The reason why a lot of fish are gonna be different like that is that your smaller ones, of course, they're trying to fight to get a meal. They're gonna hit the jig and they're gonna take off, or they're gonna hit it, kill it, take it. Your bigger boys and girls, guess what? They're the big dogs, all right? So they're just gonna bite onto it and they're just gonna hold it in their mouth. If it starts doing crazy stuff or you start messing with it, this and that, they're gonna spit it out. Because they don't need to run. They don't need to hide their meal. There's not a bigger bass that's gonna come eat them. So that's why it's just gonna be like that, and then it's gonna go. So again, my top 3 tips is select the correct jig. Based upon the jig that you select the correct gear to utilize, and know how to do the retrieval, fish it, and recognizing a bite. But again, I hope you guys appreciate all the videos that we're pumping out. Let me know in the comments down below what next technique you want to see me cover. But then again, I'm Jose, and I'm out of here.